Yo, podcast family, checking in. It's your boy Rashad here. Listen, before you watch this video with my good brother, Dr. Reuben Faloughi, he just got his doctor's, I gotta give him his credit. Just want to give you a heads up, there will be a slight delay in my part of the video as far as the visual aspect. Probably not a big deal, but I just want to let you guys know it's not your computer tripping. The audio is fine, everything is fine, but if you notice a delay in my side of the podcast part visually, it's just something I couldn't fix. But I think the conversation is so great, it had to stay on there. So hope you guys enjoy it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Till next time, peace.
Brother Rashad,
Yo, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, man.
My brother, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Long time no see, man.
I know, bro. I know. I can't. It's a little low.
It's
on
low
your
on my end.
Yes, just a little bit.
Is that better? Is this better?
I can hear you. It's all good. I think I'll find a way to finesse it. Say something else real quick.
Say something else real quick.
I can hear you, bro. I'll make it work. How you doing, man?
All is well, man. I appreciate the flexibility. I know I hit you up a little earlier. I've been going back to back to back. So when I read your message, I saw one, and I was like, oh, that's the time.
No, man, it's all good. When you called, I was like, something told me, I was like, he's an hour ahead. And I was like, it's not gonna, it doesn't matter. My man, how are you, man? I haven't seen you in such a long time.
When was the last time I saw you?
What is it, 2020? I haven't seen you since, I think 2017, man. The end of 2017 when you was teaching that class.
Man, so much has happened. But you know, everything is good, man. I feel really blessed. I got air in my lungs. I got food, water. I got my basic needs met. You know, since I last saw you, I've just really leaned into my purpose, and yeah, I graduated. So last time you saw me, I was a graduate student, and now I am a doctor. So that's a big difference.
Dr. Faloughi, that's what I'm talking about. My God.
How you been, man?
I've been good. You know,
you've been writing books. What is this?
Hey.
Wrote a book. How you beat me to writing a book already?
You was actually, man, you was the first guy that really, in college, you was the first guy that really saw something in me, man. I'll never forget, it was during the summer. I was on academic probation. I was taking a summer class, and somebody told me about you. I don't know if you remember Miss Karen over in the School of Ed. She told me about you. She's like, this is guy I want you to meet. Like, it's gonna be great. And I was like, okay. And I remember I was walking, and how she described you, I'm like, this is the guy. And you just came in with this infectious personality. It's like, hey, what's up, man? My name's Reuben. I'm like, at that time, I'm thinking, like, this dude is he's a little too happy. You know what I'm saying? I was like, yo, I was thinking about that when I reached out to you. I was like, your energy was always so electrifying. It was always so positive. It's something that I've struggled with, because I'm very cynical, like a lot of my stuff. And I'm like, Reuben was just always so positive. And I remember me and you met, and you started talking to me, and you just told me, man, you know, your situation is what it is, but you can change it. And I was like, that was the push that I needed at that time. I was 19, I was confused, I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, man, you know, I'm like, I feel like my life is over with. I feel like everything is over with. But I think you was the first guy that I met at Mizzou that really just opened my eyes to everything. And, you know, man, I would give you a lot of credit. I believe I put you in my acknowledgement, man, because I was like, you really pushed me to be a better person, man. So I appreciate that.
Ooh, dang, that's intense, man. I really appreciate that that sharing, man. Because you met me at a very unique time in my life too, where, you know, I was I was in a, can we use whatever words we want on your podcast?
Go ahead.
I was in a fuck shit up mode, and like when I met you, I felt like I was in between, really connecting with the Black undergraduate student experience at Mizzou, because as a graduate student, there's so much separation,
Yeah.
So connecting with you, it was like, wow, like these brothers like could use so much support, and for me, what I told you, that's like default Reuben stuff. And so it's like, wow, like all they need is just connection. And so I think hearing your story really, it lit a fire in me. It was like, no, the university needs to be doing something about this, because I'm not getting paid, you know what I'm saying, to improve this campus climate for people who look like me and you. They're not paying me, but they're paying people, $500,000 to do it, and so
Right.
I was sitting in between these student experiences that were shitty, and then I'm also sitting between this institution who also didn't seem like they were concerned enough about these experiences. So it was like the perfect storm for me to say, okay, no more. We're about to fuck shit up here in Missouri. Mizzou.
So take me through that process. I know a lot of people don't know about your story, and I think when I met you, I mean, I knew you was a football player just based off how you was built. You was just a super strong guy, and I was just like, something. Once I got to know you a little more, I was like, something shifted. You know what I mean? Like when you expressed, that you went to the University of Georgia, you played football, and you expressing, your admiration with that. But something changed where I feel like you just had a stronger desire to continue to educate. So share that story with me. Share how did you get to that point?
Man, how long was the podcast? No, I think I remember always being a curious kid, wanting to know more about myself, wanting to know more about the world around me. I grew up with Nigerian parents, and so there was always this strong push to learn and educate oneself. And so that was kind of programmed into me. And so when I got to college, it was like a very unique time because I went to the University of Georgia, and this is a very large university, and in some ways sports became another interest in addition to academics. And so in some moments it felt like there was tension between sports and in my academic work, but I always knew in the back of my mind, like, I'm here for school, and so that was very different from what I was learning that my teammates were taught. And so slowly but surely, as I went through college, as a student athlete, I started to seeing like how I was being programmed in a sense, programmed in a sense to believe that my role as a student athlete was to generate revenue for the university versus to leave here with a degree that's going to help me be my best self and then go help my community. Like, it was a very subtle, and nobody came out, oh, actually, there are a lot of different messages you get, some more covert, some more overt. And so by the time I was a senior, in college, I was like, I feel uncomfortable. Like, I started to understand that I was being exploited. And I didn't like the way that felt. And so I had another year of eligibility to play football, and I was like, no more. Let me apply to graduate school, because it literally started feeling like every day I would go to practice, it would be like, man, I feel like I'm on the plantation. I don't want to do this. Like, I hate this. Like, and we could talk about sports. That could be its own conversation. But the most important thing to know about that time in my life was I began to start asking very tough questions of myself and the institutions that were influencing me. So that was the athletic department and in that instance. So when I got out of that environment, I went to, so I graduated in 2013 with my bachelor's degree in psychology, and I was able to get into Pretty competitive, one of the top 5 counseling psych programs at Mizzou. Like, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I just knew I liked psychology, and, I could be a doctor and make my parents happy.
Yeah.
And so, it was very unique because I had never been just a student. I'd always been a student athlete since high school. And so to finally just be a student, I'm like, dang, this experience is a little bit different. I don't have this tight schedule, or I could just focus on my academic work, which was new. But I started to learn like the experience of a Black student at a university, especially a predominantly white institution, is very different than the experience of a student athlete. For better or worse, I think there's pros and challenges to it. But very subtle things like being told to play rap music in class. It's like, oh, that kind of makes me feel uncomfortable. What if I want to play R&B or country music? Like, can I do that as a Black person? Or, a year and a half into this competitive PhD program, you have people who are, a part of the faculty, part of the college I'm in, who continue to introduce me as this is Reuben Faloughi, the football player from Georgia we got. Almost like I'm like a kind of like token or something, or as if at least the message that I was internalizing at that time, I wasn't good enough to be a scholar, to be introduced as a scholar.
Yep.
And so that went on, but in my head, I'm like, man, compared to what I just left in football, this is nothing. Like, I'm like, ain't nobody yelling at me, ain't nobody cussing at me, like,
Right.
So as time went on, I've been telling people 2014 was my George Floyd moment. Like, it was when everything came crashing down for me because Michael Brown was shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri. And I don't know if it, Trayvon Martin, and I was connected to that, but that happened in when I was in undergrad. But I think I was distracted with football. Like, I would engage and care about it, but Michael Brown felt different. Like, I felt like, Reuben, your Black ass could be Michael Brown. It just touched me in a different way. And so, to fast forward the story, I would find myself at my first die-in held by MU for Mike Brown. 3 queer Black women started that group and were on fire. I played in front of hundreds of thousands of people, but when I was in this space, I never felt something so powerful. People speaking to power in a way I had never done or never even seen in person. And so that transformed me. Like, that made me nosedive into understanding, things like, what does privilege mean? What is white supremacy? I knew what these things, I've heard these things, but to dive into it, what does it mean to be a male or a man and experience privilege and oppression,
Right.
I really started to dive into that. And I would start organizing for that group and eventually start my own. And I think you used to come to some of the meetings for the Student Coalition for Critical Action. You remember that?
Yeah, and so I was actually going to segue to that. At that time, I always say that that's probably one of my biggest regrets while I was at Mizzou. I didn't understand the magnitude and actually just take action with that. Because during that time, again, I was just trying to just stay afloat academically. And I knew that was a very big year for me because I was trying to get into the College of Ed at that time. And I'm like, damn, like, what if they see me? And, is that going to affect my decision? And so I remember after a while, as the conversations got more intense, I was like, I'm gonna head out. And I head out simply because I was so focused on the approval of people who determined my future at that time. I didn't give it enough thought. But that was probably my only true regret at college, is that I didn't really take a stance on something that I feel like was important. And I was starting to learn about Black history, know about the culture a lot more. But I was still in the mindset of that I have to get approval by white people in order to feel like I can succeed. And so now I remember that, man. I'll never forget, because as the weeks went on by, the conversations got more intense, and I'll never forget. It was one of those conversations. I forgot who it was, but I remember they just came in and they was like, "How are we gonna dismantle the system?" I'm like, "Wait, hold on, what you mean?" And that was something that I knew that this was going to be a very prominent year for Mizzou. Because I mean, obviously, you end up being one of the faces of concerned students. If you don't mind sharing that experience, I think that is. I think people don't really understand why that happened. They just saw a bunch of people at Mizzou protest, but they don't necessarily know why.
Yeah. So, and I appreciate you sharing that, Rashad. And I hope that you'll be gentle with yourself as you navigate that version of Rashad, because that's the nature of racism, white supremacy. It creates these hierarchies and these beliefs about ourselves and the world that we all fall into. And so, you know, the fact that you even came to a meeting was radical to me. You know, some of the things that you shared in those meetings were very powerful for me. And so everything has its place and its time. So be gentle.
I know.
I know, you know, you got a whole book about it. So, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that in a second. But
Okay.
yeah, talk to me about that whole process of shifting towards, you know, you started that coalition and then it ends up becoming a lot larger and concerned students.
So, you know what it was for me as a person? I'm like, I was on fire. I was so angry. I was so pissed that, you know, it was almost like a disillusionment. Like, I thought that my program, we were going to go to Ferguson and protest. I thought that administrators, when they said that they were going to do something to address this unhealthy campus climate for people of color, Black folks, that they were going to do it. But then what I learned was, like, there's certain strategies to quell or to undermine change efforts, whether it's from students or administrators. And as a graduate student, I think that there was like a level of maturity and understanding of how these systems work that I think I probably would have even struggled with if I was an undergrad. You know, there's so much flying around, there's so much identity development happening. But as a graduate student, I was connecting the dots. Like, the things that we were learning in my class, they were happening with individuals and in the systems that I was in. And so I just felt like I needed to do whatever it took to create the things that I wanted to see. So I noticed that students like you and me, we didn't have a place where we could just talk about things. So I created a group. It's called the Student Coalition for Critical Action, where a diverse group of students can come together and talk and then decide what we want to do with what we talk about. Same thing with the Racism Lives Here. I didn't start that, but Danielle and a few others, they wanted to talk about racism on campus. So there was enough interest convergence for me to join that. And same thing with CS 1950, Concerned Student 1950. There was literally like a group of hundreds of students who were active on campus, whether they had done protests or marches or were involved in student government and leadership. And somebody said, I think it was Storm Urban, it was a Black woman. That's all I know. Black women be popping it off.
Yeah.
She was like, you know, are y'all interested in doing something? You know, I forgot the language, but she basically put a call to action out, and 11 people responded. And it was 11, you know, Black students who were tired of experiencing racism on campus, you know, being called nigger, or, you know, having Peyton Head being called nigger while on campus. He's a student body president, you know, which is
crazy.
Yeah, which is crazy. And then the administration, they waited until the Washington Post made it an issue to even address it with the campus and with him. And then you're like, hold on, you expect me to think that you care about him when you only decide to address it after, when it affects your public relations or your PR? Like, no, that's a game. Right. And so it got to the point, man, where, bro, like, I was angry. We sent, I think it was me, Jonathan Butler, Kiera Otis, and I think a guy named Bryant. You know, so 2 graduate students, 2 undergraduate students. We sent them a message, like the chancellor and top 3 provosts. We're like, look, this is what's going on campus for Black students. This is what's going on for all students. You know, it's an unhealthy campus environment. We went to the forums and such. What can you do? Man, they sent us back. They basically told us to join all the Black student organizations to be heard. That was the wrong time for that.
Right.
So we sent a message back. We were like, okay, all right. If you don't create a plan in the next such and such days to address this, we're going to start highlighting the blatant racism, et cetera, on campus. And sure enough, they didn't. And sure enough, we started to do it. Like things just started blowing up on campus.
Yeah, I think I just remember everything happening piece by piece. I think the most infamous thing that happened was, I think, at the homecoming parade. And I think that is the aspect of why people don't truly understand what happened at Mizzou. It was that aspect of the homecoming parade that really turned it up. You mind going into depth about that?
Yeah, so it got to a point where there was just so much, and it wasn't just Black students. It was like a lot of different marginalized communities, whether, you were Jewish, Muslim, gay, women, like they had all been having graduate students. I mean, graduate students lost their insurance with like less than 24 hours notice. Yep. And I had never seen so many white people mobilize at one time. It was crazy. Right. But so it was almost like, I call it the perfect storm because, and so, I think Black folks, we just have a unique history of mobilizing and organizing. And so that's the kind of context to give it the color. So we were like, look, we need to bring clearly administration's not hearing us. So we need to elevate our message to get heard. We need media and we need people outside of this community understanding what's happening here. Because that's how they react. If it affects their money or their PR, they'll react. And so what happened was that call to action was put out in that group me, and I said, shit, I'll go. And that became the concerned student group. And so for 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, we were meeting on parking decks, parking garages at people's houses to really create this demonstration to stop, because you know how Mizzou touts being the first university to do homecoming. So it's almost like a ritual-like tradition that everybody, especially the white folks, love it. I mean, but even Black folks love it. It's just a big thing in that community. So we're like, we need to use this to elevate our message. And so we planned it. We planned for safety. We planned for what our message was, how we were going to structure it. We're going to talk about the history of racism at the University of Missouri. And the day of, I'm sure, different members of the group are going to flesh this out in books along the way. Like, how we had planned to set it up didn't happen. So we ended up like running across campus, to catch Tim Wolf. And that would become the demonstration that really highlighted just how disconnected the university leadership was from our experience and the community. Because, if your audience goes and watch that video, it became a very tense situation and could have actually gotten really ugly quickly.
Oh, yeah. I remember watching the video, but obviously you were there. But the one thing that stood out to me from this is when I knew how separate and white and Black, at least Missouri, was. That was a prime example. I believe it was you all on the crossing walk, like right by campus, but also like heading towards downtown. And I remember you all were starting to speak and started to open up on grievances, and the infamous MIZ ZOU chant started, essentially drowning you out from getting your message across. Talk about, if you want to, talk about that experience of what do you remember about that? Like your mindset, what was going on? Because this is all leading up to the former president, Tim Wolf, coming in with the infamous moment with his vehicle. Talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I think there was a lot of, to me, I was just in the zone. I'm like, man, fuck this. Like, because we had planned it so tightly we had planned it so tightly, and like I think certain, there were different members of the group. I ain't gonna out nobody. There are different folks in the group who are super anxious, and I was like, you can't back out now. Like we're here now. Right. So I was trying to keep composed for the group, but then also to, I was gonna be the first one to speak. So I needed to just focus on what we're doing. Again, our plan was shifted. So I was like, okay, how can we make this happen in an effective way? So I was kind of focused. But as the protests went on, I think I was hurt, man. I was hurt. I don't think I understood. I hadn't been confronted with that type of group hate before. Like, it's like, wow, we're just students here who want to talk about, how challenging and traumatic our experience as Black students are or is at this university. And so the fact that the community, was drowning us out, it was very triggering. But again, focusing, like I knew that we needed to get what we needed to get done and get out of that street, because who knew what the police were going to do? Who knew what these community members were going to do? And you see, as it progressed, the tension kept building.
Yeah, man. I think I remember just watching that video, man. It was one of those moments, like I said, that's where, I learned a lot about the real strength and courage it means to truly lead. Because obviously you doing something like that and everybody that's involved doing something like that, once that ends, you have to move completely different, because you now know that you are an exposed target to an issue that everybody did not agree with, especially with a disproportion of race at that school. So you're going to be more likely to be sought after during those moments. So take me to the point of where Mr. Wolf's car comes into place and then leads to that next aspect of what truly changed the campus.
You might clarify the last part when you say the truly changed to the campus. Like,
not true. I mean, like that's what created I think the true uproar, like what changed, got everybody to get out.
Yeah. So, and ask me the question again if I don't answer it. But
okay.
All I know is I heard this Chevy. It sounded like it had a 350 in it, revving up. And because I'd heard that sound before, and our backs were turned at that point. So I'm like, wow, like we might get hit. Like to me, that's threatening,
Right.
And so what happened was, as it went on, like you would see white folks start to get involved and maneuver themselves between, the car and us. And so it's like, are you protecting the car? I was confused. But yeah, I think so I think, whoever was driving the car clearly was trying to get around us, and we were adjusting. And then, at one point you had white folks get between the car and I. So, at any point, Tim Wolf could have, acknowledged us. I mean, it was almost, I remember looking at him, and I want to be careful because I don't know what he was feeling in his heart, but it felt like he just missed the humanity in us. It just felt like, somebody in the crowd, when I hear that video, they say, move on. Why don't you march and do it? And so it's almost like that like indifference that was just, it felt so hurtful to me. Like I felt so sad. And I remember feeling sad in that moment, trying to make eye contact, and it was almost like I was getting looked through. So yeah, that was a very intense moment, but that also was very symbolic of like how administration was addressing these issues of racism and this toxic campus climate. So I don't know if you want me to talk about what happened with this protest and how it started to, expedite the change process.
I mean, I know at least with the expedition, at least from my perspective, was that the simple fact that that incident happened, and everybody was essentially expecting a response, a letter to the campus, to you all, about what was going on. I don't think he responded until, like 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks, something like that. And that just took off. And I feel like that's when I really started to think like, yo, they really don't care, man. And it's one of those things where there's a bit of frustration because, growing up in most Black communities, we're always told to go to college. College is something that has been instilled, drilled in us for a long period of life, man. And I believe education is valuable. But that was the point where I started to realize, I started doing my research, like history, like historically, college was like an elitist type of thing. Only privileged kids can go to colleges, right? And so it made me start thinking, how much of one Mizzou are we? And that was one of our slogans, one Mizzou. It's like you have kids that are expressing grievances on being uncomfortable on campus. You are literally being blinded to the fact, even if you don't have the answers. I think people have to understand, even if you don't have the answers, just address that we are aware that it's a problem. You know what I mean? Like, that's always been the biggest issue that people in leadership have struggled with, is truly addressing that there's an issue and we need to find a way to create solutions. I think that's all y'all originally wanted, was that. And the fact that they didn't do that, it led to this, But I think the pivotal moment was really, and I hate to say it like this because I feel like they got a lot of credit for it, was when the football team started protesting and they started standing out, because that created the change because it started hitting them in their pockets. You want to talk about that experience?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you brought that up because, again, optics, ESPN, mainstream media, they would come in and shift our whole narrative, which is why I am the number one spokesperson against mainstream media, because it's propaganda. Like, I saw them literally come in and divert the attention from racism at Missouri to Melissa Click and, just everything else that didn't matter and that wasn't, our message. But if we go back one step before the football players.
Go ahead.
After that 2-week period, I had to get out of Columbia. It was too much racism. I was doing too much on campus. I needed a break. So I went to Georgia. I drove to Georgia with my homie, and I was on my way back. And Jonathan Butler hits me on the phone. He's like, bro, I'm thinking about doing this hunger strike. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, because me and Jonathan Butler were talking very often at that point. It wasn't nothing new. I was like, hold on. Like, and he was like, I don't plan on eating until Tim Wolf resigns. And I was like, cool, yeah. But then I was like, okay, so what if he doesn't resign? And then it got quiet.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck.
Mm-hmm.
My homie's about to risk it all. Like, so. Right. At that point, it was just, all right, how are we going to make this happen? Because we are holding some tough stuff now. My friend's life, who I care dearly about, he is, he cares about this issue so much, he's willing to risk his life. So school, to be honest, it became secondary. And we should circle back around to that because I would have to readjust my priorities. But that became the focus. There was Tent City that was constructed, again, the Black women in the group. They created this city. So every day that Jonathan Butler would protest, we would occupy this place on campus, which literally grew into a little community where people could learn about what was going on, where people could get a meal, where people could crash overnight. That's why they got that policy that people can't, camp out or protest in the quad anymore. Because
that's it.
Shut that shit down. Okay. But I think that actually got us a lot of momentum, that hunger strike. People on campus started to understand more. And again, I think we started to tap into people's humanity. Because I don't think a lot of people, even if you engage in racist behavior, I think there are many people there who didn't want to see a student die for the reasons that he was going to die. And so I think that was what got, the athletes. And, there's a lot of context with the athletes where they also are dealing with the toxic, environment that, engages in racist policies and practices. And so it was a matter of connecting these two experiences as Black students at the University of Missouri, and boom, shit blew up so quick. I ain't never seen a text get sent, and within hours the story was on ESPN. Within hours, CNN, Fox News, everybody just converged on good old Columbia, Missouri to to talk about what was going on.
Yeah, I was iffy about bringing up the hunger strike, because obviously I feel like it affected everybody differently. I will never forget. I got an opportunity to get close with Jonathan, I think, prior to that, not only with your initiative, but myself. I don't know if you remember Martin Solomon.
Yeah.
Okay, Martin. It was him. I believe it was Max too. Max Little. We was going to do something with inner city kids in Columbia in education. So that's how I met Jonathan. But I'll never forget, because at that point in time, I was just going to class and I was going home. I was like, man, I'll figure it out. I went to Walmart and I saw Jonathan. And I was like, hey, what's up, Jonathan? I got to see you in a while. He said, hey, what's up, man? But he had this look. He had this piercing look. I'll never forget. He had this piercing look that I'm about to do something that nobody think is possible. He's like, yeah, man, good seeing you. But he just had this very distraught look. And then that's when I found out about the hunger strike. But I'll never forget, I was in the business school for something. It was late at night and I was catching the shuttle back to my apartment. And this is when the tents first came out. This is when his whole set was already out. I'll never forget, there was two white guys that came to the tent. And this is what they said verbatim. My mom may be listening to this. I don't try to cuss around my mama, but they was like, you gonna die for this dumb shit. And they just went on and on and on. And I'll never forget, there was a long line of people trying to get on the bus, to go back to where they're supposed to go to. But I was the only Black person over there. So you got one side of white people looking distraught, and then they all like turning their heads and like looking at me, and the other people just looking like, what is going on? But I was so disturbed by it, because it made me think that, what if this, for example, was somebody like Tim Tebow? Use Tim Tebow. What if Tim Tebow was standing for solidarity with racism and inequality on campus? Would Tim Tebow, if he wasn't an athlete, just a regular kid, would Tim Tebow get the same reception that Jonathan is getting? Jonathan's in the tent. He not bothering nobody. He just literally said, I am willing to risk my life for the betterment of the future of this campus. And I will never forget that moment, man, because it made me realize, when you were really serious about something, you were truly willing to die for it. And it made me realize a lot of people not really willing to die for it. You know what I mean? And so that was something I've always held in my heart when I was thinking about stuff. I'm like, man, Jonathan was willing to die for somebody, or for the greater good of an entire community that felt marginalized and separated on campus. I was like, a lot of people wouldn't do that. And that's not to discredit the work that any of you all have done. It was just, he was willing to. I don't care what people say about what they think that was stupid. Jonathan was really willing to die for that. And, to this day, people try to start pulling up stuff about Jonathan and his life to try to discredit. It's like, it doesn't matter about what Jonathan had or his family or whatever people were saying. It's like, that was something Jonathan wanted to do. Because he realized it wasn't right, man. And again, that led into the football thing happening. And then I know Melissa Click, she was a professor, right? And she got pushed. But correct me if I'm wrong, she was protesting for the issue, right? She wasn't against it, she was for it, right?
Yeah, she was definitely wanting to align as an ally. I mean, she was actually at the homecoming demonstration,
Oh, okay.
So she was there, they pulled video clips of that, but it's crazy what white folks will do when they're upset. They found video clips of her at the protest kind of cussing at the cops because the cops came with pepper spray and they started pushing us. And so she was like one of the first white people to be like, no, you going the fuck off. And then so when we had the tent city, and I think that, you know, eventually Tim Wolf and Lofton, they resigned, she was a part of like a group who were trying to protect, because the media was just doing too much. She was trying to protect us. And then I think a student might have pushed her or pushed her hand. And I think she also re-engaged and they ate her alive after that.
Yeah, I won't forget that because that made me also realize about allyship. And now even fast forwarding to what's going on today. And when everything was going on, you was the first person that I thought about. Just because, one, I mean, I haven't talked to you in a long period of time, but two, it's just like, I was like, Reuben knows, he looks at things very similar to how I look at them. It's a very overall perspective, very pro-Black when it comes to support and the importance of uplifting the community. But when it comes to a true problem in humanity, I was like, Reuben's the guy I need to talk to. I'm like, this makes perfect, because you taught me so much about enlightenment and really getting in tune with myself. Yeah, I give you a lot of credit for that. I mean, I do my own reading and stuff, but you were the first guy that made me think, you know, very deep about what's important. Because a lot of us, we think of stuff at a very surface level thing, but I'm like, there's a lot more to life than just the basic everyday process that a lot of us really worry about. Like, there's like some true internal stuff like we need to dive into. And that's essentially why I wrote the book, man, because I just graduated school, I was at home, and that readjustment to being in my parents' house and not knowing what I was doing, I feel like I just worked so hard to get to this place, and I felt more lost. Yeah, most of that book, I was depressed. I put it in the book. I'm like, that book was like an outlet for me trying to inspire myself, but also knowing like, man, there's a lot of people out here who also feel like this too. As much as I said, as much as I am for my people, humanity has an issue of not really being in tune with what's going on. And that's why I feel like a lot of this stuff happens today, man. What happened to George Floyd is downright disgusting. And obviously, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, I mean, the list is so extensive, I really get tired of saying names because it shouldn't have to be like this. And what really frustrates me, and I'm sure it frustrates you as well, is that you have so many people that are so divided on the simple issue is that a human life was slain by a system that has used their power as leverage and cover themselves. That is the simple principle. You can strip away race for a second, but if we add back in race, this is more prominent in Black communities and other people of color that you see on a media platform. You know, people like to throw out statistics like, well, you know, why don't white stuff happens all the time? Like, yeah, that's a higher percentage. So, duh. I mean, but the media don't talk about that. You're not waking up every day on CNN, seeing the same 8-minute video that we're all seeing. And they're showing the same clip of a dude holding down his neck and watching him die slowly. Imagine what that would do to your psyche. You know what I mean?
It's traumatic.
Like, that's the stuff, and that's even what I've been thinking about now. It's like a lot of us have a lot of trauma. Yes. Just because we see so much that it just puts us in this place. Like, we're almost desensitized to it, man. Maybe it could just be me, but like, it happens. I'm like, I don't even know what to say anymore.
Yeah, but in the context of trauma, it makes sense. Like, you know, there's something called racial trauma. And like, to survive as a Black person, as a Black man in this society, like, you have to figure out a way to kind of compartmentalize your emotions or you'll go crazy. Like, you will literally lose it psychologically, emotionally. And so, yeah, like, I tell people, watching lynching to over and over and over and over and over and over again of people who look like you, that's not good for your health. So I limit how much I look at them now, because I like to balance being connected to the suffering versus creating space so I can be effective as I navigate suffering. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. That's actually I never thought of it like that. And maybe, like I said, I'm a realist when it comes to these things. So I try not to avoid it. I probably try to soak in as much as I can, because I have to be honest with myself that this can happen to anybody I know. This can happen to myself. This can happen to anybody that I know. And it's one of those things where, even now, even from a work standpoint, I'm the only Black person in my job. You know what I mean? It's like that was an issue that I noticed when it came to this. I had some colleagues that really spoke up for me and just spoke up that the fact that this is an issue and it shouldn't be Rashad's responsibility to bring it up, because we all see it. You know what I mean? Like, we all see what is going on. We shouldn't have to act like it's not going on. Because I also mean this in the most respectful way. If there is an issue about women, sexuality, or some sort of religious mishappening on campus, they're very prominent to show their support and solidarity. But when it comes to race, everything gets silent immediately. And I mentioned that when I talked to them as a group. I was like, we have to quit having this guilt of the truth. You shouldn't personally feel guilty unless you align with what that person was doing. You know what I mean? Like, you could not determine the skin that you were born. And a lot of stuff that you were taught growing up was taught because it was passed down from your parents. I have that type of thought process. That's why I don't get mad when I see so much ignorant comments. Because I'm like, you don't really think that. You were taught that. And then you accepted that. And so you now believe it. So that makes it more sense. But also knowing, like, if you take the time to probably talk to somebody, you can also unlearn that as well. And I've seen a lot of at least my constituents that have had their conflicts with their families, they have now spoken up about it, which I'm always glad to see. But also, it shouldn't have to take another tragedy to happen, you know. And so I don't know, man. I feel like what you do is great, and I'm actually very proud that you actually got your doctorate now. And I know you're going to do so many great things in regards to the overall goal of humanity, because I think that is what your overall focus is. And that's something that I've always admired for a long. I always believe in giving people their roses while they're here, man. Like, that's something that you have to do. And I can't act so big-headed, like, you know, I did this by myself. And no, it's people help people get to certain places. And you don't ever know how much that person has got you, man. That was, like I said, you and so many other people inspired me to get to this point, because y'all saw so much in me. And obviously I want to do the same for the next people, because we need more Black psychologists, doctors, lawyers, engineers. Yes, everything that's important, because we need people to truly lift us. But I do have a question for you, man. Okay, this was a question I think you may have an answer to. What do you think is the biggest problem with humanity?
Separation. Because in my head, there's this concept. Ooh, I got a meeting coming up, so we'll have to figure out how we want to get to our ending. But it's separation, Rashad, man. I think that I believe in this concept called oneness, and that all of us come from the same source. And you know, if you think about it, like, what's the smallest particle in all of us? It's atom. It's all energy. And so I think because of you know, our physical forms, you know, you being Rashad, me being Reuben, I think because of the ideas that we're programmed into, like identity, you know, this person being white, this person being Black, it creates separation. And then what humans have done with that separation has created power dynamics and hierarchies, where because I identify with this group, whether it's a man or a straight person or a white person, I'm better than this other group or this other person that I'm separated from, which, you know, usually the oppressed folks in these instances, women, LGBTQIA folks, poor people, people who are differently able, I'm better than them. And so it creates the isms. Like, that is the nature of all isms. one group feels like they're better than another. But the reality is, if my theory is true, we're all one. So it's like it's a game that we've created, and it's literally a life or death game. And so that's the biggest issue. Like, until people start to see this brother, this sister, this person is me and I am them, we're gonna have a bumpy ride home.
No, I agree with that, man. I agree with that. Well, my brother, I appreciate you joining, man. I know you're a busy guy. Getting a hold of you is like getting a hold of the president now. But I'm for real, man. I'm glad that you joined. I enjoyed this conversation, brother. Hope you're staying safe. I don't know when I will see you physically, but I know I'll see you soon, man. And if you ever need anything I can do to help, man, I would definitely love to join, man. I know you're gonna do a lot of big things that you already are doing. It's just gonna get bigger. So
I appreciate that, Rashad. If I could say one thing to you, brother, I would just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, man. Hearing you sharing your story and how I influenced you really reminds me of just how important all of us are in this journey. You helped me as much as I helped you. And, you know, you wrote a book. You're doing a podcast. You're doing so many beautiful things in this world. So you keeping on. I'm going to keep keeping on. And humanity, I think we'll be able to change this thing, man. I'm very hopeful because I see people like you doing you.
that's love, man. My brother, man. Well, I'll talk to you soon, all right?
All right, brother. Take care. I love you, man. Take care.
Yeah, later, bro. All right.
All right, bye.